They say time heals everything, but betrayal has its own clock. My wife thought her secret dinner would vanish into the night, hidden behind laughter and candlelight, but fate had other plans. That evening, I reserved the table beside hers and walked in with the last person she ever expected to see. When our eyes met, the world fell silent. They say time heals, but betrayal never leaves quietly. It lingers in the corners of your mind, whispering in moments when you should be at peace. For years I thought my marriage was unbreakable, the kind built on quiet love and mutual respect. My wife, Claire, had always been elegant, calm, the kind of woman who made others believe in stability. We lived in a small cottage on the outskirts of Bath, the kind of place that smelled of old books and freshly baked bread. Sundays meant coffee in the garden. Winters meant 2 blankets and 1 shared silence. For 10 years, that silence felt warm. Then one evening it turned cold. It began with her phone. A single message, nothing more than, "I can't wait to see you again tonight." No name. Just words. Words that struck harder than any confession. At first, I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding. Maybe it was her friend, her colleague, anything but what my heart already knew. But lies are heavy things. They don't float for long. That night, Claire said she had a late client dinner. She dressed differently, not in her usual business attire, but in a soft blue dress she hadn't worn in years. The kind she used to wear when she wanted to impress me. I remember watching her apply her lipstick. Steady hand, calm eyes, a faint smile that didn't reach me. She left with a kiss on my cheek, as if sealing the illusion one last time. When the door closed behind her, I sat there, staring at the clock, the walls, the quiet. It wasn't anger that came first. It was emptiness. That awful stillness of realizing you've been replaced, and the world continues spinning as if nothing has changed. Then, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to scream. I didn't want to confront. I wanted truth. Quiet, undeniable truth, so I did something I never thought I would do. I followed her. The streets of Bath glowed under the evening lamps, rain soft against the cobblestones. I parked 2 blocks away and watched her walk into a restaurant called the Willow Garden, a cozy, candlelit place where couples went to forget the world. She wasn't alone. A man greeted her at the door, tall, charming, confident in a way that told me this wasn't their first meeting. I saw her smile, that real smile, the one I hadn't seen in months. And just like that, everything I believed in fell apart. I sat there for 10 minutes, engine running, breath shallow. My mind screamed for me to drive away, to pretend it didn't happen. But instead I called someone, a number I never thought I'd dial again. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. It was Emma, his wife. When I told her who I was and what I had seen, silence filled the line. Then quietly she said, "I think it's time they see us too." And that's how the plan began. The next evening, I called the Willow Garden and reserved the table right beside theirs. The evening air carried a chill, the kind that sneaks under your collar and settles in your bones. The streets of Bath glimmered with wet reflections from the lamps, as if the city itself knew what was about to unfold. I parked the car a short distance away and adjusted my tie, careful to keep my composure. Beside me sat Emma, his wife, calm but with a spark of nervous anticipation in her eyes. We walked together toward the Willow Garden, each step deliberate, silent except for the occasional tap of our shoes against the cobblestone. The restaurant was alive with muted chatter and soft piano music, couples exchanging words that felt almost sacred. And there at the far corner sat Claire and him. The man she had smiled at leaned toward, whispered to. The scene I had seen a night before played out again, like a cruel theater, except this time, the audience included me. Emma and I paused for a moment at the doorway, letting the maître d' notice our reservation. He nodded politely, guiding us to the table directly beside theirs. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Claire glanced up as we were seated. Her smile faltered, curiosity flashing in her eyes. And then she saw Emma. The realization was instantaneous. The kind of shock that erases all sound. Her boyfriend's jaw slackened, eyes wide, as if he had walked into a nightmare he couldn't escape. The restaurant seemed to hush itself around us. The soft piano keys, the low murmur of other diners, all vanished. In that moment, every head turned subtly toward our table. Silence wasn't merely a pause. It was a weight pressing on everyone present. I sipped my water calmly, letting the tension build. Emma's eyes met mine briefly, a silent agreement passing between us. No shouting, no confrontation, just presence. Claire opened her mouth, trying to form words, but the sound caught in her throat. The man reached across the table, perhaps to hold her hand, but hesitated as his gaze met Emma's. The waitstaff, discreet yet alert, paused in their movements. Silverware clinked softly on plates, but even the glasses seemed to tremble with the tension. It was a performance no one had scripted, yet the drama was undeniable. I leaned back slightly, letting the silence speak for me. Every movement, every glance, every subtle shift of posture became a statement. You could feel the narrative of betrayal and revelation unfolding around us. The room was small, intimate, yet every soul present became an unwilling witness. Claire's eyes welled up, a tremor running across her lips. Her lover's confidence waned, replaced by fear and regret. Emma remained composed, a quiet storm of dignity and restrained anger. And I? I stayed calm, letting the quiet do the talking, letting the truth of our arrival echo louder than any words could. That night, I realized something crucial about revenge. It isn't always about yelling, confrontation, or chaos. Sometimes it's simply about being seen, about showing up when they least expect it, letting their own conscience and guilt fill the silence with its own weight. As dessert menus were handed out and the couple sat frozen, I knew this was only the beginning. The evening had started, but the story, our story, had only begun to unfold. And every second that passed in that hush-filled room was another moment of truth, another heartbeat of poetic justice. The restaurant remained frozen, each second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. Claire's eyes darted between me and Emma, as if seeking an escape from the inevitable truth. Her lover sat rigid, hands clenching the edge of the table, the blush of guilt rising slowly across his cheeks. Around us, the diners tried not to stare, but the story unfolding demanded attention, a silent spectacle of betrayal exposed in the quietest possible way. I set down my glass, deliberately slow, and glanced toward Claire. Do you remember the promises you made? My voice was soft, measured, not angry, just full of the weight of years spent trusting someone who would betray me. She tried to answer, but her words faltered. The rehearsed excuses, the smooth lies she had carried with her like a shield, now crumbled under the gaze of those who had finally come to witness. Emma placed her hand lightly on mine, a subtle signal that the confrontation didn't need to be loud. Her presence alone spoke volumes, not vengeance, but undeniable truth. The man beside Claire could no longer meet our eyes. Shame and fear anchored him to his chair. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope, placing it deliberately on the table in front of Claire. This is for you, I said. A reminder of what you've risked losing. She hesitated, fingers trembling as she reached for it. Inside was a collection of photographs, receipts, and notes, all proof of the secret rendezvous, all carefully documented. Each image and detail reflected a betrayal meticulously chronicled, not for revenge, but for clarity. The air was thick with unspoken realization. Claire's lips quivered and a tear traced down her cheek. The man's shoulders slumped, as if the weight of their deceit had physically struck him. Around us, whispers began to circulate, not from me, but from the truth itself. A truth so undeniable that even the soft piano in the background could not mask its resonance. I looked around the restaurant, catching glimpses of diners' expressions, curiosity, shock, a faint understanding. Their silence was no longer just politeness. It was acknowledgement. The scene was not merely about betrayal, but about the gravity of choices and the consequences of deceit. Claire finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Why bring her here? Emma met her gaze calmly. Because it's time you saw the person you hurt. The person who was hurt the most was standing right beside me. I leaned back, letting the moment linger. No one needed to shout. No one needed to raise a voice. Silence had done more than words ever could. The story had reached its crescendo, not through confrontation, but through presence, through visibility, through undeniable truth. By the time the dessert was served, Claire's composure had shattered entirely. She sat there, realizing that her secrets were no longer hers to hide. And in that quiet restaurant, I understood a profound lesson. Revenge isn't always about action. Sometimes it's simply about being seen, about letting the consequences of one's choices ripple naturally into reality. The night stretched on, yet nothing more needed to be said. The message had been delivered, not with anger, but with dignity. And as Emma and I rose from our chairs, leaving the couple to face the echoes of their own deceit, I felt a weight lift, not of hatred, but of clarity and quiet justice. The restaurant had returned to its normal rhythm, soft chatter and clinking silverware filling the spaces where silence had reigned moments before. Yet for Claire and her companion, nothing would ever be normal again. Every glance, every shadow, every whispered thought would remind them of the presence they had tried to ignore, the truth they could no longer escape. Emma and I walked out into the cool night air, the city lights reflecting off the wet cobblestones, painting the streets in gold and silver. I breathed deeply, the tension in my shoulders slowly releasing. It wasn't triumph that filled me, nor satisfaction. It was clarity, the kind that comes when deception is illuminated, when silence itself carries justice. "You handled that beautifully," Emma said softly, her voice a calm anchor amidst the storm of emotions. Not a word spoken, yet everything was said. I smiled faintly. Sometimes the quietest moments are the loudest. We walked a few blocks in silence, each step deliberate, savoring the peace that comes after the storm. For a long time I had imagined revenge as fire, anger and chaos consuming everything. But tonight I understood that true justice doesn't roar. It exists in the subtle, in the unseen, in the presence that leaves an unshakable impression. Back home, the cottage was quiet. The familiar scent of old books and fresh tea greeted me like a balm. I sank into my armchair, reflecting on the lessons learned. Life was unpredictable, filled with betrayals and surprises. Yet the way we respond, with dignity, patience, and calm, defines who we truly are. Claire's actions had been a shock, a rupture in what I thought was an unbreakable life. But they also revealed something essential. My strength wasn't in confrontation, nor in anger, but in restraint, in presence, in witnessing the truth without being consumed by it. Emma and I shared a quiet smile, a mutual understanding passing between us. There would be no celebration, no triumphalism. The story had been told in the way it needed to be told. Silently, undeniably, perfectly. In the weeks that followed, the couple faced the consequences of their choices. The restaurant staff who had witnessed the scene often spoke of it with a mixture of awe and whispered respect. The diners remembered the silence, the way it spoke louder than any argument ever could. And for me, life resumed its rhythm, enriched by the knowledge that justice can exist in subtlety, that strength can be quiet, and that presence can sometimes be more powerful than words. As I sat by the window, watching the city lights shimmer on the wet streets, I understood that life would always have its betrayals. But clarity, dignity, and truth, these were unshakable. And in that realization I found my peace, because sometimes the loudest statement is made simply by showing up. The restaurant is quiet now, the echoes of that night fading into memory. But the truth remains, unspoken, undeniable, unforgettable. Some lessons don't need words. Some victories aren't loud. Sometimes showing up, standing tall, and letting reality speak for itself is enough. And in that quiet presence we find clarity, dignity, and peace.